Good evening, and welcome to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. This is your host, Lance White. By the way, I loved tonight's Dawn and Win show. You guys were very funny, very entertaining, very intuitive, and I want to wish Dawn a happy 11th anniversary and many more. Before I introduce tonight's guest, I'd like to take a moment to wish my friend Joy a wonderful and happy birthday. Enjoy your evening with Bernie, Joy. And while I'm spreading so much love around, I might as well say hello to another friend and a former guest, Helen Littrell, who wrote a wonderful book called Raechel's Eyes. This kind of segues into tonight's guest because it's a similar topic. There's a lot about abductions going on and connection with ETs and other world beings. And my guest tonight is Ann Andrews. Ann has written a book entitled Walking Between Worlds Belonging to None. Her story focuses on her son, Jason, who is a long-term abductee and an Indigo star child. Alien abduction typically runs in families, and Ann Andrews came from a long line of abductees. Although it wasn't until her son's experiences accelerated that she began having dreams and was given back long-hidden memories, which enabled her to accept and cope with what was going on with her youngest son, Jason. Ann lives in England, so she's kindly agreed to stay up into the wee hours to be with us tonight. So let's welcome Ann from this other world over the seas, if she's on now. Ann, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, good. Hi, Ann. How are you tonight?
I'm very well, thank you. I've got a little bit of a cold, I must warn you, but other than that, I'm fine.
Well, we'll muffle through it. How's that?
That's great.
Thanks so much for staying up late to be on the show. I didn't realize until just before the show that you're at 3 o'clock in the morning there, isn't it?
That's correct, yes.
Oh, thanks so much, Ann. I really appreciate it.
That's right. It's a pleasure.
I loved your book, by the way. And
thank you.
I think for our listeners, so that we can all kind of get clued in on what's happening, can you just start at the beginning and tell us what your book is about and what inspired you to write it?
Yes, of course. It's called Walking Between Worlds Belonging to None. It's basically about us as a family. That's myself, my husband Paul, our two boys, Daniel and Jason. And it's, I suppose I could say basically, it's about our journey. It centers around our youngest son, Jason, and just after he was born, we now understand that he was being abducted by ETs, and so that the book sort of chronicles our journeys, our understandings, and how basically we went from an initial standpoint of fear and confusion to where we all are now, which is a lot more understanding. We're a lot more spiritual, a lot more aware. And as I say, initially we were very frightened, but now we accept it as part of our lives, and I think the whole experience has been good.
When did Jason first start having trouble?
That would be just after he was born. When we came back from the hospital, after a few weeks, we put him in his own room, in his cot, and during the night and the day, we would hear him crying. Occasionally we would go into his room, and a few times we would find him not in his cot at all. He was always in the room. Sometimes he was underneath the cot, sometimes behind a door. As I say, always in the room, but we couldn't work out what was happening, what was going on. So for the sake of, I suppose, rationality, we worked out that if our oldest son, Daniel, who was 4 at the time, we worked out that maybe if he stood on a chair and maybe if he stood on tiptoes, he might be able to reach the baby. So, as I say, because of, obviously thinking rationally, we said, well, that's got to be the answer. It must be it must be Daniel that's moving him. But so there were times when Daniel wasn't even in the house. He was staying at his grandmother's or something, and it would still happen. But, we just wouldn't even sort of face those times.
How long did this kind of thing occur? Well, how long did it happen before you began to actually move from denial and justifying what it was to starting to actually consider that it might be something metaphysical or otherworldly?
Truthfully, Lance, that took us 12 years to actually come to that conclusion.
Wow.
An awful long time. I mean, during that time, we actually sort of subjected Jason to all sorts of medical, clinical tests.
Uh-huh.
We took him to see child behaviorists, specialists, psychiatrists, and truthfully, all we ever got from the psychiatrist was a letter to us and to our GP stating that he is not psychotic.
Uh-huh.
In other words, the thing that he'd been telling us since he was able to talk, and his story never ever changed. The psychiatrist said that is the truth. He's telling you the truth.
Wow. And when he started talking, how old was he, and when did he start talking about the visitors, and what did he say?
Well, basically, he used to. I suppose he was about sort of 2.5, 3. When like toddler just starts to understand and put sentences together.
Mm-hmm.
He would run into our bedroom some nights, absolutely terrified, and he would tell us that the little men were coming for him or had come for him.
Mm-hmm.
He would tell us that they come up through the floor, they come through the walls, the windows. He said he described them as what he called little people with very big eyes.
Mm-hmm.
He said that there was always a bigger one, a taller one with them that looked very much the same. And he would say that they would make him very still so that he couldn't move. And then he said that they would make him fly, and they would take him to what he called a hospital place.
Mm-hmm.
Where they would do I suppose tests on him, and this which at times are very painful, but he associated it with that was like a hospital place.
Mm-hmm. Were there any people there that he recognized as being from Earth as well, or were they all from another like Greys or the small little people?
Truthfully, when he was young, he couldn't get over the terror. Couldn't get over the fear. I mean, we put it down each time to. We just said, well, he's having nightmares. This is what's happening. This is what's going on. As I say, it wasn't until, as I said, when he got to the age of 12 that we were actually sort of given an insight into what was actually going on.
Mm-hmm.
But it was at that point when when we actually started to really believe him. I mean, we were always there for him in the sense that all parents are there for their children,
mm-hmm.
To hug them, tell them that they're safe and everything's fine. But we just couldn't believe what he was telling us, which
mm-hmm.
is why obviously we put it down to nightmares. But it was at the point where we did start to say, look, we believe you, we know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at that point that he started, maybe, I suppose, to listen to them and to start learning and to start understanding, because I suppose at that time he had our support, and it changed everything for him,
mm-hmm.
because he was sort of listening and understanding what was going on. That, I suppose that was the time that he started to sort of look around and notice other things. And yes, there were quite a few times when, he did see other people, other human people.
Uh-huh. What are some of the other things that you started to notice about that time in his life? It was like starting around 12.
Well, I suppose that the highlight would have been on his 4th birthday.
Uh-huh.
I say highlight, but that was a really strange thing,
uh-huh.
which began on his 4th birthday.
Okay.
It was his first ever birthday party, so obviously he was extremely excited by it all. And it was when the party was over that, myself and Paul, my husband, and my mum, who come over for the day, we were all clearing up. All the children had gone. Daniel was in his bed. Jason had fallen asleep on the couch.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a thunderstorm just starting outside. It was, heavy rain. It was about 10 o'clock at night. And then suddenly there was a very heavy knocking at the door, which obviously we thought was very strange at that time. Paul answered the door, but there was nobody there, so he closed the door again. And then suddenly there was this sort of big bolt of lightning, at which point Jason sort of sat bolt upright on the couch and started just coming out with incredible numbers, just sort of, I suppose, in computer fashion, just coming out with all these numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And then the knocking started again, but this time it wasn't just the door, it was all over the house, it was upstairs, out the back, on the windows. It sounded like, there was an army sort of, just banging on the house.
Wow.
And then suddenly it died down again, and Jason stood up and started walking towards the door. And my husband sort of put his hands on his shoulders and just sort of gently said to him, "Where are you going, boy? It's pouring down, you're going to get soaked." Without even looking at him, Jason just said, "I have to go, they're waiting for me."
Huh.
Which was quite chilling, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And at that point, the banging sort of increased in severity. It got really, really loud.
Wow.
And then, of course, my husband sort of not knowing what else to do, and of course all of us were really frightened. He just picked him up and sort of just held him really tight, held him close. And I said, "What's going on? Like, we don't understand." And at which point Jason seemed to sort of come out of his trance-like state, and as he did so, the knocking receded. And then, of course, he just looked at his dad and said, "Oh, I'm up late, can I watch telly?" And, so he wasn't even aware that anything had gone on.
Wow. Wow, it's amazing.
So,
when did Jason begin to not be afraid of them and understand his relationship? And did they explain to him in any way or communicate telepathically why they were doing this?
Yes, he's explained that to us, which, as I said, the turning point for him was just after he was 12,
okay.
Because that was the point at which we got the psychiatrist's letters, and we didn't really know which way to turn. And it was a TV program about hypnosis that we were watching, which sort of gave us, obviously pointed us in the right direction. But so that is all documented in the book. But it was at that point that we started sort of saying, well, this is real. This is actually happening. It's happening to our son.
Mm-hmm.
And we started reading, looking into this more in an effort to obviously be there for him in every way that we possibly could.
Uh-huh.
And I think, it's like even now, if you say to Jason, what is it in all of this, Jason, that sticks in your memory? He will always say it was the day my mum and dad said that they believed me. Because, as he says, it changed everything for him. He began to not be so terrified because he knew that he had our total support. And that's when he started listening. And they actually explained to him that they were only doing what they were doing because they were waking him up to, the reality of who he really is.
Oh. And that kind of ties into the concept of him being an indigo child and a star child. Can you explain what an indigo child is and how you discovered that Jason was one?
Yes, I'll explain it to you as I understand it. It's my understanding that a star child or an indigo child, I believe that they are the same thing.
Mm.
They're born to parents where either both or one of whom is an abductee, whether they know it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But they carry the ET part of the ET gene, if you can understand that. It's almost, it's like they know that they don't come from here, that they don't belong here on this planet, that they know that they come from elsewhere, from somewhere else out there in space somewhere. But they're extremely, extremely intelligent, not in the ways that we would expect, like, reading and writing and, the things that our values. But, they're basically, they're here to help us, to help us to understand our part in everything, and to help us, to become aware of our own sort of spirituality, our own consciousness. And that is what the Indigo children are here for, and they are gathering in numbers.
It's quite a phenomenon, the Indigo children, and now I believe there are crystal children and even rainbow children. And I've heard that the names for those kids have to do with the color of their aura, that the first wave of indigos came through actually as long as 100 years ago, and that there are adult indigos, and probably many people in the audience are adult indigos, or their children are indigos, and it has to do with the color of their aura being indigo. Does Jason have any abilities that are beyond the normal that you're aware of?
Yes, he does. And as you rightly say, people that can see auras have told us that Jason's aura is a very dark blue, indigo. But yes, he has certain psychic abilities. He can astrally travel and astrally project. And this we have got proof of, and also he is a very gifted healer.
Is he aware of where humanity might be headed in the near future?
He says that yes, that there are quite a few possibilities. When we've asked him about this sort of thing, he says, well, nothing is ever written in stone. And he also says, this is why human race is interesting to us. He always sort of counts himself, as part of them. He always says, this is why humans are interesting to us, because because you have free choice. He said, you make your own decisions. He said that this is what makes you interesting, because you have free will. He said, in a way, it's interesting to see, exactly what you will do. In other words, which way you will, you will head.
That kind of infers that the ETs and the beings from that density do not have free will.
It does actually, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that before. What I was going to ask you was, you mentioned that often the child that's been abducted quite frequently has one parent or the other who has also been abducted. You had some experiences as well, didn't you? And they came back through hypnosis?
That's correct. Yes, that they did, and it appears that I've had quite a few experiences which I've managed to sort of keep well hidden.
Is there anything that you can tell us about your own experiences that you either remember or have spoken of in your sessions of hypnosis?
Yes, I can tell you, obviously very briefly of a couple. One being when I remember very, very clearly, and this wasn't through hypnosis, this was a very clear memory of when I was about 7 or 8. I remember waking up in my bed, not being able to sleep, so I went into my mum's room and asked if I could sleep with her, because I just felt very afraid. My dad was working nights, so, of course she said, yes, come on, you can get in here. And still not being able to sleep, I distinctly remember, when you get that feeling that somebody is there, and I remember sort of like, peeping over the bedclothes to see a hooded figure just almost like float around the side of the bed, and then I'm sort of gazing at it, and terrified, and I couldn't wake my mum. She wouldn't wake up, and the family dog was asleep at the bottom of the bed as well, and he wouldn't wake. And I just remember these sort of, long fingers going up to this hood to push it back. And that was the only memory I had for many, many years. And it wasn't until I started sort of, getting some of my own memories back through hypnosis and other means, that I was able to sort of remember how that progressed. But it's interesting because I remember sort of the next morning still being terrified and trying to tell my mum about it. And, I remember to this day, her sort of sitting me down and giving me a cuddle and saying, look, you've had a nightmare. That's all it is. You've had a nightmare.
Right.
And, of course, many years later, there we were again, same scenario, saying the same thing to our son. But so that was one. And there was another time when I was with my dad. My dad was a full Romany, and he used to like nothing more than taking me for like these long walks in our local parks. And I remember walking with him in the park one day when we were suddenly confronted by some very what I thought that at the time were very tanned people. That they had a lovely sort of suntan. And I remember that clearly because I thought, well, aren't they lucky to be able to afford to, go abroad for their holiday? Because obviously in those days that would have been a big thing. And I remember just sort of standing, and nobody said anything. My dad, I believe he knew them, but he was surprised to see them there, but, not shocked because he knew them. And then it was like, suddenly, I was holding my dad's hand, and then I just became aware, I don't know how, but I just suddenly became aware that we weren't in the park anymore. I couldn't see the sun, and we weren't standing on the grass, and I don't know how we got there, but we were on some sort of big sort of metallic sort of hallway-like room. And then I always remember, one of them stepping forward, and almost if he noticed me, and then it's like his eyes, you couldn't sort of break away from his gaze, and he just sort of reached down and took my hand and just sort of started walking me away from my dad and the other people, and it was like, the only thing I could think of was, well, what's going on, because my dad's always told me never to talk to strangers and don't go with strangers, and yet he's letting them, why is he letting them? And this very human-looking man, but with very large blue eyes, he took me to this room, and the door opened, and it was a very noisy room because there were lots of children, and they all had toys to play with, and building bricks, and all the sort of things that young children like to play, all different ages. And he let go of my hand, so. That there I was just in this room, and he left, and then this young boy sort of came over to me, and for some reason I knew him. We knew each other, and instantly I knew that he was deaf. I don't know how, but I knew that he was deaf, and we just sort of grabbed each other's hands and just went off and just started playing with the toys. And that's that was my sort of memory of that experience.
Wow. Was it your impression or feeling that the beings that were with you at that time were benevolent?
Yes, most definitely. I didn't see or hear anything that would have sort of told me otherwise. At least I felt very comfortable. Obviously, at first I was very frightened because, as I say, there was this stranger taking me away from my dad, and I'm thinking, why is he standing there? Why is he letting him? But as I say, once I got into the room and recognised the boy, and he recognised me, and we were playing. It was all forgotten, and it was it was a real nice feeling to be back there, because. Then I knew that I'd been there so many times. Everything was so familiar.
Wow. Now, this kind of leads me into a question about the possibility, since Jason is part of this whole process, and you've been part of the process, we know that it's been said that these beings are using humanity or humans for breeding purposes as well, and we don't know why that might be happening, but apparently it seems to be benevolent from what you're saying. Is it possible that Jason's DNA or his birth was altered in some way, or I believe he might have even actually been a walk-in as well? Is that true?
That's correct. Yes, we weren't even aware of any of this until his 18th birthday.
Oh, okay.
It was like when I was expecting Jason, the doctors were extremely worried about the health of the baby and obviously myself. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until the baby was actually being born that the emergency room sort of erupted into sort of action. And at the time, my husband, who was with me, was told to possibly expect for the child to be stillborn, because they sort of put on a fetal monitor and other equipment, but they weren't registering any sort of heartbeat, which was extremely worrying. So of course then the race was on, to get the baby born and for them to do what they could. But of course, when Jason was born, he was extremely healthy, very, very noisy, and that hasn't changed much. But he was a perfectly normal, healthy baby, which totally surprised the staff. But everybody was absolutely delighted. And then the staff said to us, "Oh, well, obviously the machine is faulty. We'll get that taken care of." But it wasn't, as I said, until his 18th birthday, because we were getting ready for his party, and expecting all his friends to turn up. And he came and sat us down and said, I'll make you a cup of tea, which, we thought, oh, something's coming, he never does that. And that's when he explained to us that he had chosen us to be his parents because he knew that we would understand in time. We would come to understand just exactly what was going on. And he said that he knew that the baby that I was carrying would be born dead. And he said that he had to wait until the instant that the baby's soul or essence or energy actually departed from the child. He said, and at that moment, he said, at that sort of split second, he said, that is when I walked in.
Wow.
He said, because he said, I wanted to experience what it was like to be human again. He said, and also he said, I thought if I get to understand, humans better, he said, when the time comes, he said, I'll be in a better position to help and to do what I can.
Wow.
Which was a bit of a revelation.
That's chilling. That's chilling.
It is.
That's chilling. That's such an absorbing story that it just completely threw me off. I was right there with you at the birth, and I've spoken to other people who've written books about pre-incarnational contracts and people agreeing, to do this and that before they incarnate. And to actually hear somebody talk about, the soul leaving in one split second and the other one moving into it is just, and to be aware of that is such an amazing phenomenon. I mean, it's just really quite special. So with time, it appears that he became more aware of who he was and why he incarnated. So apparently all of this fear and all that was something that he had to go through because he chose to be born into your family.
That's correct, yes.
Now, what insights have you gained since then, and what is he doing today? I mean, what does he have a purpose, or is he here to change the world? Is he in communication with other Indigo kids since they're telepathic? What do you know about that?
Yes, he tells me that he is in communication with a lot of the Indigo or star children. he says that he does a lot of his work when he travels astrally.
Okay.
He also says that part of his work is to attend like accidents or this sort of thing where he said he actually helps the he calls it the essence. He helps the soul to move on.
Wow.
To realize that their physical body is gone and just to move on.
Uh-huh.
He said that is all part of his work. He does a lot of his healing work when he does this sort of astrally as well.
Wow.
But he said he is here basically as are all the other indigos who are here and who are arriving. To help us help us all to become more aware of becoming what we all once were, what we once had. He said because he said we were all able at one time to use all of our brain. We all had the power of telekinesis, telepathy. He said it was all there. He said it was all there, for you. Everybody could do it. It wasn't, it wasn't a big thing. It wasn't only certain people that could do it. He said you could all do it.
Wow.
He said you also were very, very spiritual, not in any religious sense at all, but just in. He said you've lost it. He said you've lost that connection. He said you've not. So you've got to start realizing again, that you are all connected to each other. We're all part of each other. He said, and we're all connected to the planet, which again is a living thing. It's a living energy.
Uh-huh.
He said once you understand, that you're part of that, you're part of that consciousness. He said you can just sort of do anything, He said literally the world is your oyster.
Wow, that's such a beautiful. I just am deeply moved by that message. Does he seem to feel that all of us as a whole, or the Earth as a planet, as a living entity, is headed towards some sort of shift in consciousness? Or is that a possibility? And we talk about that a lot on our show, about 2012 and so on. Does he ever speak about dates or prophecies of the Mayan calendar, anything like that, or is he beyond all that?
Yeah, we have asked him quite a few times about 2012, and he just says to us, "Well, it's a number." And we say, "Well, yes, but surely you've heard all the all the theories about 2012 and the Mayan calendar." And he said, "Yes, but it's a number." He said because he said technically time doesn't exist.
Yeah.
He said it's something that humans have invented. He said to make them feel more in control. He said that. He said you in another sense, he said you are talking about the end of one time and the beginning of another.
Yeah.
He called it he calls it like a world shift. He said he said things are going to happen. He said but he said it can go sort of down quite a few different paths. He said that this is why there are so many indigos and star children here now. He said to help you. He said if you can get over your own sort of I suppose sort of arrogance, really, is the way he put it. He said to acknowledge these children that they do know more than say adults, and will be able to sort of help you and guide you. He said, because he said that there is just one rule, he said, and that is that we can never, ever interfere. He said we can advise, we can assist, we can help, we can do whatever you ask of us. He said, but he said we can never make it happen. He said, because he said, again, that's got to be your choice. You've got to decide which path you're going to go down. He said, and, he said, and once you start down it, he said, that's going to be down to humanity.
Does he have awareness of why we lost all of our abilities? Some people refer to that as the fall from grace, or the fall of from higher densities to lower densities, and some say that we were placed in a frequency control and so on and so forth. And of course, everybody's heard about the theories that there are negative polarity entities which are, trying to use us for their energy and purposes. Does he say why we fell, why did we become disconnected from our spirit and the telekinesis and the powers that we've had in the past? And does he ever explain that?
Yes, I believe he has done. Again, we've sort of questioned him about all this sort of thing. And he said to us that, yes, like I said to you before, humankind did have all of these things that, the Starkers are sort of considered special for now. He said, but he relates it to going back to the time of Atlantis.
Okay.
And he says that he said that they will never find any evidence of Atlantis. He said because he said Atlantis was the world. He said it wasn't a group. He said it wasn't a race of people like the Sumerians or Babylonians. He said it was. The world had got to the stage of, everybody was part of Atlantis. He said that was most of the world.
Wow.
And then he went on to explain that, basically, because of everything that we had, he said we got lazy. He said, and then he said we got bored, and then we started sort of, going back to the making things, making machines, this sort of thing. He said at first it was just for pleasure, just for fun, for something to do. He said it became more and more intense, and then it was, sort of certain people started sort of taking over and saying, well, we need to sort of make weapons because, this side might attack us or they might do something, so we need to be ready. And he said it's basically, he said you've got to the stage that you're getting to now. He said at that time, he said you had it all. He said you had everything.
Wow.
He said it was, you agreed again that, got the better of you. He said it's happened so many times.
Really? And again, it seems that history is repeating itself, and here we are, creating a empire with weapons and, secret black operations and underground facilities and so on and so forth. Speaking of that kind of brings up the question about the concept that certain governments might actually be working with some alien races. Did you discover anything about that issue?
Yes, again, this is something that we discussed, and he's explained to me. He said, look, he said, the way it is on this planet, he said, is that you've got good people, you've got bad people. He said that is the balance. He said that balance is maintained. He said wherever you go in the universe, he said you will always find the balance of good and evil, basically. He said it's no different out there. He said of all the races that visit this planet, he said some come, with your, with your future, in their mind. He said some are benevolent. They're here to help, to do what they can. He said, but he said that you also get visited by the, as he calls them, the not so good guys. He said because he said that there is always a balance, and he said yes. He said quite a few of our military personnel, our governments, are working with certain ETs, certain races. He said although they think that they're in control, they're in charge. He said so that they will get a rude awakening.
Yes, I can understand that one.
Yeah.
Do you, because of his connection with some of these beings, are you monitored by certain government groups? Are you do they keep an eye on you, do you think, or are you pretty much lead a normal life?
Basically, we lead a normal life, I suppose. Okay. I suppose you would say. I mean, we have sort of so much sort of paranormal stuff going on around us at certain times. But sort of if you overlook that, then yeah, we're just normal people, and that's how I would always describe myself. I'm just normal person who sometimes has to endure sort of abnormal things, basically.
Yeah.
But, you know, having said that, I mean, we know that we are watched. You know, that there have been a few incidents with our telephones. And also, especially sort of late at night, you know, if we get up to use the bathroom, we will sometimes notice a light sort of coming through the window. And then, of course, you know, your first thought is, well, look out the window to see what's going on. And it's car headlights. So, in other words, you know, there's a car sort of been parked in our driveway, waiting for someone to switch on a light in the house, so that they can then sort of shine their lights to let us know that they're there. Which is, you know, it's rather bizarre. And then, of course, the car sort of then starts up and drives away sort of very slowly, you know, to say, like, you know, we are here, we're watching you.
Yeah.
And we've had that a few times. We've also had an incident where, sorry, have I got time, Lance, or am I badly not?
No.
Hello?
Hello, are you there?
Oh, sorry, yes, I am.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, all right, okay. Yeah, I was just saying, are we all right for time, or?
No, we're fine. We have 15 more minutes.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, well, I was just going to explain what one of the experiences we had.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. You have plenty of time.
What it was, I was woken up one morning, you know, that the phone rang, and it was a lady who lives in one of the houses at the very beginning of the road where we live. And she said to me, she said, you know, Mrs. Andrews, because, you know, I didn't know her. She got my name from the phone book. And she went on to tell me that during the night they'd had an intruder in their garage, you know, herself and her husband. And she said, we went into the garage, and my husband put the lights on, you know, and he went in sort of armed with a baseball bat, and I followed him. She said there was this very well-dressed man, she said. It looked to be in his 30-something. She said, dark suit, dark tie, you know, she was very smart, very clean cut. She said he just looked at us and grinned, she said, and then carried on sort of, you know, like rummaging through, you know, our stuff. Like, you know, we had some boxes in there. She said even when my husband told him to stop and, you know, leave things alone, she said he just looked up and looked at us and said, you know, I want to speak to Anne Andrews. And of course, at that time, you know, that they didn't know me. So of course, the husband said, "We don't know anybody by that name," and he just grinned and he said, "Are you sure?" And they said yes, and he carried on rummaging. The wife went to phone the police, and she came back to the garage and said to her husband, "The police will be here, you know, in a few minutes." You know, that they said, "We'll try and keep him here." And the guy took no notice at all. He carried on rummaging, and then she said literally about a minute before the police arrived, she said he just put everything down and just smiled at them again and then said, "Oh, I have to go now." And she said he just came towards us and just pushed past us. She said we moved out of the way, she said, and she said, for the life of me I don't know why. She said he never touched us or did anything. She said we were so frightened of him. And she said we followed him outside, she said, thinking, well, we'll get the number of his car, you know, we'll get the registration and give it to the police. She said he just walked out into the middle of the fields, you know, just disappeared into the darkness.
Really?
And she said it was the exact same time that the police arrived. So, of course, she went through the story and said that they'd asked for me, etc., etc. And her phone call that morning was obviously to tell me what happened and to ask if the police had been in touch. And, of course, I said, no, I hadn't heard anything. So she asked me to phone the police and said that she would do the same and try and get to the bottom of it, because obviously I said that I didn't know who the guy was. And we did. We both phoned the police. I was put through to about 4 different departments, and then in the end I spoke to, I think, some senior officer, and he just said to me, "Oh, yes, don't worry about that. It's all been sorted." So I said, well, you know, I'd like to know what it was all about. And he said, well, you don't need to know. It's been sorted. So, you know, which is a very, very strange thing.
Yeah.
And then she said to me, well, why didn't he just look up our phone number in the phone book the same way that she had done? So
Strange.
You know, I really don't know what to make of that. You know, sort of people saying, "Oh, Men in Black," you know.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like.
I don't know. I really don't. That's a real strange one.
Wow. Is Jason still being in contact with these aliens?
Yes, most definitely.
Does he actually go onto the ships, or is it just telepathic, or what?
He does. Well, he does both. You know, he tells us that he sees them now as equals. You know, he calls them his friends. He believes that, you know, that they're all equal. But he says that, you know, he's contacted all the time, and vice versa. He can contact them telepathically.
Uh-huh.
He does visit the ships, sort of, you know, every so often. And you know, I think really, you know, the bottom line is he does enjoy his relationship with them.
Wow. Well, what's one of the more interesting things that you've probably had all the same questions that any of us would have had, you know, like what's going on, why are they here, what are they doing, and what's happening? What's some of the most interesting information that you discovered from your own questions to him?
Oh dear, that's a good one.
Well, like, why are they doing this would be a good place to start. You know, the abductions, right. and you kind of touched onto it already, but I just wanted to see if we could find out anything more to dig a little bit deeper into the you know, how is this a cause? Are they doing this all across the globe? Does he know, you know, is it an isolated event? Is it common?
What, the abductions?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he said it's a global thing. Okay. He said that there are a number of reasons why abductions occur. He said not all abductions are alien abduction. Some of them are performed by military.
Really?
But he said, in the main part, just speaking, you know, strictly, you know, from the ET side, he said one of the main reasons is that because of all the weaponry and everything that you know, the capabilities that we have now, he said there is, you know, like a fear in the universe that if we explode this planet, obviously it would have sort of far-reaching consequences, you know, throughout the galaxy. It would have like a knock-on effect, as it were. You know, it could sort of destroy other things. And you know, he said, but also he said some of the abductions are to measure the I can't say it.
Toxicity?
Like the poison levels, you know, in the air, and in what we do. He said it's how they measure sort of, you know, what we're doing to the planet, what we're doing with, you know, chemicals, this sort of thing. He said it's all sort of, you know, measures. He said basically to keep an eye on what humans are doing, you know, what we're getting up to, I suppose. But yeah, he said, you know, you know, we are sort of worried about, you know, what you're up to, basically.
Does he ever talk about global warming or chemtrails?
Yes, he again, he says they're not a good thing. You know, the global warming is well, mainly sort of, you know, down to us because of all the pollution that we're putting out there. But, you know, something interesting that he did say as well, which was that, you know, he said that most of the technology that we have now, he said that we wouldn't have access to it if it wasn't for certain races of ET. And I said to him, well, you know, how do you work that out? You know, how can you justify that? And he said, well, if you think about it, he said, do you not think it's really strange the way, you know, sort of technology has come on in leaps and bounds in the last 50 years? He said, because he said, you know, he said prior to like the 1950s, he said it was a very, very slow sort of progression, he said, which is how it should have been. He said, but then he said suddenly you go from, you know, sort of like in the last 50 years, you know, he said you're up to, well, the technology that we have now, he said, which, he said, I'm sure you said if you think about it, he said that sort of speeded up tenfold. He said, he said, don't think that, so you're all responsible for it. He said, because you're not. So, there again, I suppose that sort of, worry what we're going to do with this technology. And I suppose in another way, I suppose, perhaps they feel partly responsible.
Because he's an Indigo child and he has had all these different experiences, would you have any words of advice for other parents who have Indigo children, and what would you recommend for them to, what would you say to those people, to the parents?
Right. What I would say is that the main reason for writing our book is because we hope that, if it helps just one family understand, what is happening to their child, then it is worth it.
Yeah.
Because we spent 12 years, denying any possible, anything to do with ETs, UFOs. To us, our social upbringing was such that it just did not exist. It would not be allowed to exist. It didn't happen. Therefore, it couldn't be anything to do with that. As I said, we took our son to so many sort of so-called experts, thinking they'll have the answer. And I mean, I'm not suggesting. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that every child that has a nightmare is being abducted, because that's ludicrous. But all I would say to anybody out there who,
hello,
and is listen to them. Just please listen to them and be there for them.
Yeah. We're coming to the end of the hour, and I notice our connection is starting to go bad. Maybe the aliens are interfering with us, or the government is.
Somebody is, yes.
That's a long way to string a wire between two cans. So maybe my can is falling apart here. But before we go, would you tell people where they could find your book, and do you have a website or anything as well, or?
I don't have a website, but that's my fault, because I don't know how to set one up, but I will one day get someone to do it for me. But yes, if anybody wants to buy the book, it is available on Amazon.
Right.
That's Amazon.com. And also there will shortly be a DVD will be coming out with an interview with Jason, which will accompany the book. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. If you had to just kind of say in one sentence what Jason's message might be for our audience and for the world, what would that be?
I know what he'd say. He'd say, it's time for you to wake up. It's time for you to realize, your true potential, and to be all that you can be.
And cope with what was going on with her youngest son, Jason. Anne lives in England, so she's kindly agreed to stay up into the wee hours to be with us tonight. So let's welcome Anne from this other world over the seas, if she's on now. Anne, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, good. Hi, Anne. How are you tonight?
I'm very well, thank you. I've got a little bit of a cold, I must warn you, but other than that, I'm fine.
Well, we'll muffle through it. How's that?
That's great.
Thanks so much for staying up late to be on the show. I didn't realize until just before the show that it's 3 o'clock in the morning there, isn't it?
That's correct, yes.
Oh, thanks so much, Anne. I really appreciate it.
That's right. It's a pleasure.
I loved your book, by the way. And
thank you.
I think for our listeners, so that we can all kind of get clued in on what's happening, can you just start at the beginning and tell us what your book is about and what inspired you to write it?
Yes, of course. It's called Walking Between Worlds Belonging to None. It's basically about us as a family. That's myself, my husband Paul, our two boys, Daniel and Jason. A few times we would find him not in his cot at all. He was always in the room. Sometimes he was underneath the cot, sometimes behind a door. as I say, always in the room, but we couldn't work out what was happening, what was going on. So for the sake of, I suppose, rationality, we worked out that if our oldest son, Daniel, who was 4 at the time, we worked out that maybe if he stood on a chair and maybe if he stood on tiptoes, he might be able to reach the baby. So, as I say, because of, obviously thinking rationally, we said, well, that's got to be the answer. It must be, it must be Daniel that's moving him. But to say that there were times when Daniel wasn't even in the house, he was staying at his grandmother's or something, and it would still happen. But we just, we wouldn't even sort of face those times.
How long did this kind of thing occur? Well, how long did it happen before you began to actually move from denial and justifying what it was to starting to actually consider that it might be something metaphysical or otherworldly?
Truthfully, Lance, that took us 12 years to actually come to that conclusion. Wow. And it's, I suppose I could say basically, it's about our journey. It centers around our youngest son, Jason, and just after he was born, we now understand that he was being abducted by ETs, and so that the book sort of chronicles our journeys, our understandings, and how basically we went from an initial standpoint of fear and confusion to where we all are now, which is a lot more understanding. We're a lot more spiritual, a lot more aware, and as I say, initially we were very frightened, but now we accept it as part of our lives, and I think the whole experience has been good.
When did Jason first start having trouble?
That would be just after he was born. We came back from when we came back from the hospital. After a few weeks, we put him in his own room in his cot. And during the night and the day, we would hear him crying. Occasionally we would go into his room, and we would for a long time. I mean, during that time, we actually sort of subjected Jason to all sorts of medical, clinical tests. We took him to see child behaviorists, specialists, psychiatrists. And truthfully, all we ever got from the psychiatrist was a letter to us and to our GP stating that he is not psychotic. In other words, the thing that he'd been telling us since he was able to talk, and his story never ever changed, the psychiatrist said, that is the truth. He's telling you the truth.
Wow. And when he started talking, how old was he, and when did he start talking about the visitors, and what did he say?
Well, basically, he used to, I suppose he was about sort of 2.5, 3, when like toddler just starts to understand and put sentences together. He would run into our bedroom some nights, absolutely terrified, and he would tell us that the little men were coming for him, or had come for him. He would tell us that they come up through the floor, they come through the walls, the windows. He said he described them as what he called little.
Good evening, and welcome to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. This is your host, Lance White. By the way, I loved tonight's Dawn and Win show. You guys were very funny, very entertaining, very intuitive, and I want to wish Dawn a happy 11th anniversary and many more. Before I introduce tonight's guest, I'd like to take a moment to wish my friend Joy a wonderful and happy birthday. Enjoy your evening with Bernie, Joy. And while I'm spreading so much love around, I might as well say hello to another friend and a former guest, Helen Littrell, who wrote a wonderful book called Raechel's Eyes. This kind of segues into tonight's guest because it's a similar topic. There's a lot about abductions going on and connection with ETs and other world beings. And my guest tonight is Ann Andrews. Ann has written a book entitled Walking Between Worlds Belonging to None. Her story focuses on her son, Jason, who is a long-term abductee and an Indigo star child. Alien abduction typically runs in families, and Ann Andrews came from a long line of abductees. Although it wasn't until her son's experiences accelerated that she began having dreams and was given back long-hidden memories, which enabled her to accept